Welcome back to Global Intelligence Brief on Bonus Life. Today, we are diving deep into a conflict that mainstream media is only giving you half the story on. The US and Israel's military operations against Iran, which began on February 28, 2026, have fundamentally altered the geopolitical landscape of the entire world. This is not just another regional skirmish. This is a global economic shockwave that is already being felt in every corner of the planet. From fuel pumps in California where gas is approaching $9 a gallon, to factory floors in Asia where production is grinding to a halt. We are going to unpack the major changes, the shifting strategic alliances, the catastrophic impact of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and the uncomfortable truths that the mainstream narrative conveniently glosses over. We will also look at the best and worst case scenarios for the global economy, trade, financial markets, and the crypto space, drawing on analysis from the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, BlackRock, Morgan Stanley, Brookings Institution, and other credible sources. Let us get into the facts. The timeline of this conflict is critical to understand because the official narrative of a clean, surgical, preemptive strike does not tell the full story. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a massive coordinated military operation against Iran. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz described it as a preemptive action to remove threats against the state of Israel, while U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Washington had to act preemptively in the face of expected Iranian attacks on U.S. forces. The most significant outcome of the initial wave was the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who had ruled since 1989, killed in an Israeli airstrike on his compound. His son, Mojtaba Khamenei, was named successor on March 8th. Dozens of senior figures in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps were also eliminated, along with Security Chief Ali Larijani and Intelligence Minister Ismail Khatib. The strikes hit Iran's nuclear program sites, the Karg Island oil terminal, which is considered Iran's economic lifeline, and the South Pass natural gas field, part of the world's largest gas reserve. But here is what many outlets downplay. According to the US-based human rights activists in Iran, as of March 24th, at least 3,291 people had been killed in Iran, including 1,455 civilians, of which 217 were children. Iran accused the US and Israel of striking near a girls' school, killing 168 people, including around 110 children. BBC Verify confirmed a US Tomahawk missile hit a military base near the school. This is the human cost that gets buried beneath the strategic headlines. Iran's response has been fierce and far-reaching, and this is where the conflict becomes truly global. Tehran launched widespread missile and drone attacks against Israel, targeting government and military sites in Tel Aviv and elsewhere, killing 16 Israeli civilians as of March 24th. But Iran did not stop there. It struck US allied states across the Gulf, hitting Qatar, Bahrain, Jordan, the UAE, Kuwait, Oman, and Saudi Arabia. 13 US service members have been killed. On March 18th, Iran attacked an energy complex in Qatar. At least 20 people have been killed across the Gulf states. Hezbollah opened a new front in Lebanon on March 2nd, firing rockets at Israeli positions to avenge Khamenei's assassination. Israel responded with devastating strikes on Beirut and southern Lebanon, killing 1,072 people, including 121 children, and displacing over 1 million people. Iran even fired 2 ballistic missiles at the UK military base on Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, though neither reached the target. A British base in Cyprus was struck by a drone. Turkey reported NATO air defenses shot down 3 Iranian missiles over its airspace. This conflict has metastasized well beyond the Middle East, and the escalation trajectory is deeply concerning. The geopolitical fallout has been immediate and profound, and it reveals uncomfortable truths about the nature of international alliances. The traditional power dynamics in the Middle East are being tested like never before. Arab Gulf nations, which had been carefully walking a fine line between the US and Iran for years, are now caught directly in the crossfire, with their own citizens dying from Iranian missile strikes. Here is what mainstream coverage often misses. Iran's closest strategic partners, China and Russia, have not intervened militarily. According to CNBC, Iran's allies have not offered material support, exposing the hard limits of its strategic partnerships. China is playing the long game, maintaining a stance of non-intervention to protect its broader economic interests. As Time magazine reported, the question has become ubiquitous. Why is Beijing not doing more to support Tehran? The answer is simple. China imports massive amounts of Gulf oil, and picking sides risks its energy security. Russia, already stretched thin, has offered only a limited response. The Brookings Institution described the war as a major geopolitical setback for Russia, with a sharp personal twist. Meanwhile, India has chosen a path of dialogue, maintaining its strategic autonomy. The Columbia University Energy Policy Center noted that the conflict could actually deepen China-Russia energy relations as the Strait of Hormuz closer pushes China to seek alternative suppliers. The alliance map is being redrawn in real time. Now, the most devastating economic consequence of this war, and the one that affects every single person watching this, is the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is the jugular vein of the global economy. Typically, 20 million barrels of oil flow through it every single day. That is roughly 20% of the global oil supply and 20% of liquefied natural gas shipments. 1/3 of the world's seaborne crude oil passes through this choke point. Iran has effectively shut it down, littering it with mines and declaring it under its control. Only certain ships paying hefty premiums have been allowed to pass. This is a supply disruption 3 to 5 times larger than the oil shocks of the 1970s and 1990s, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. The 1973 oil crisis removed only about 6% of global oil supplies. The 1979 Iranian Revolution disrupted about 4%. Today, we are dealing with nearly 20%. This is unprecedented in the history of global energy markets. Asia, which receives 80% of Gulf oil exports, is hurting the most. The Guardian reported fuel rations and cash handouts across Southeast Asia. The CSIS noted that not even Beijing is getting shipments through the strait. And this is not just about oil. Fertilizer exports from the Gulf have been disrupted, threatening a global food shock, as Al Jazeera reported. Let us look at the hard numbers because the economic modeling is sobering. According to research published by the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas on March 20th, a one-quarter closure of the Strait of Hormuz pushes oil prices to nearly $98 a barrel and knocks 2.9 percentage points off global GDP growth. If the closure extends to 2 quarters, oil hits $115 a barrel. A 3-quarter closure could see prices skyrocket to $132 a barrel by year-end 2026. Morgan Stanley's analysis warned of higher oil prices, hotter inflation, and greater market volatility. Oxford Economics modeled a scenario where a short-term closure pushes oil to $140 a barrel and gas above $40 per MMBTU. The Harvard Business Review stated plainly that the full impact has not yet been felt. This is not just about expensive fuel at the pump. Fertilizers are a byproduct of natural gas. So when gas prices spike, agricultural input costs explode. That means food prices rise globally. Supply chains across every sector, from manufacturing to pharmaceuticals, are facing severe disruptions. The Chevron CEO stated that the effects of the strait closure are not fully priced into current markets. In other words, the worst may still be ahead. So where does this leave us? Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, recently outlined 2 extreme scenarios for how this ends, and he was remarkably blunt. There is likely no middle ground. The best-case scenario is that the new Iranian leadership under Mojtaba Khamenei decides to integrate with the international community. If diplomacy prevails, perhaps through the 15-point ceasefire plan currently being mediated by Pakistan, and the Strait of Hormuz reopens quickly, we could see an era of abundance. In this scenario, Iranian oil floods the global market, prices drop to as low as $40 a barrel within a year, and global growth surges. Financial markets would rally strongly, inflation fears would subside, and central banks could resume easing monetary policy. The Dallas Fed models show that if the strait reopens after just 1 quarter, oil drops back to $68 a barrel and GDP growth rebounds by 2.2 percentage points. Trade routes normalize, supply chains recover, and the world breathes a collective sigh of relief. Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, said he is a little optimistic about the long-term outcome. Wall Street has been determinedly upbeat about a quick resolution, but optimism and reality do not always align. The worst-case scenario, however, is genuinely grim, and it is the one that deserves more attention than it is getting. If Iran remains defiant and continues to disrupt trade through the Strait of Hormuz, we are looking at years of oil priced between $100 and $150 a barrel. Larry Fink was explicit. This outcome means a stark and steep global recession. The prolonged energy shock would cause persistent hot inflation, forcing central banks to hike interest rates even further at a time when economies are already fragile. Agricultural supply chains would collapse as fertilizer costs become prohibitive, leading to widespread food insecurity across developing nations. The Brookings Institution warned that Iran's survival strategy is precisely to impose high costs on Washington, their neighbors, and the global economy. Bloomberg warned that the financial system has unknowns and is not prepared for the shocks that a prolonged conflict would deliver. Corporate profits would be squeezed by exorbitant energy and transportation costs, unemployment would rise, consumer spending would contract, and the geopolitical instability would create a feedback loop of uncertainty that markets despise. This is not fear-mongering. These are the projections from the most respected economic institutions in the world. Now, here is where it gets really interesting, and this is the part mainstream financial media struggles to explain. The financial markets are responding in unexpected ways. While stocks initially dipped, they have not crashed as much as anticipated, perhaps buoyed by hopes of a quick resolution. Gold, traditionally a safe haven during wartime, has actually been falling, which has puzzled many investors. But the real story is in the crypto market. When the war began on a Saturday, Bitcoin was the only major asset trading, and it initially sold off, dropping 8.5%. However, within 2 weeks, Bitcoin rebounded sharply, outperforming nearly every other asset class. As of mid-March, Bitcoin was trading near $74,000, up about 11% from pre-war levels. CoinDesk reported that Bitcoin is outperforming nearly everything. Morningstar noted that the Iran conflict may have actually helped crypto prices recover even as stocks struggle. Bitcoin is showing remarkable resilience, acting as a hedge against geopolitical uncertainty and the inflation risks associated with the oil shock. Investors are increasingly viewing decentralized assets as a safer bet when traditional global supply chains and fiat currency-based systems are under threat. This is a structural shift that could accelerate crypto adoption globally. In conclusion, the US-Israel-Iran war is not just a regional conflict. It is a pivot point for the global economy and the international order. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz has exposed the terrifying fragility of our energy supply chains and the interconnectedness of global trade. Whether we head toward a global recession or an era of renewed growth depends entirely on how quickly this conflict can be resolved and the strait reopened. The diplomatic signals are mixed. The 15-point ceasefire plan offers hope, but Iran has not accepted it, and fighting continues on day 27. As the UN Secretary General said, this conflict is out of control. The truth is that the decisions made in the coming weeks will shape the global economy for years, possibly decades, to come. As always, we will keep monitoring the data and bringing you the unfiltered truth that others avoid. Thank you for watching Global Intelligence Brief on Bonnie's Life. If this analysis helped you understand what is really happening, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear the truth. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Stay informed and stay safe.